I'm pretty much, a pure scientist, and I had, until that point, no interest in entrepreneurship, even though I had lived in Silicon Valley for a while. So I was seeing a lot of my friends and, people around me being very successful. And that field alone had just been invented, actually part of it at HP, 10 or 15 years before. So it's not like it was like a super mature thing. So there were only a handful of people in the world at that time who could have kind of taken on, this project. HP being a big company, they just move slower, right? When you have an idea and you're convinced that it's going to work, you can't wait, right? And in this case, it was not only me, but a lot of people inside and outside HP, started to contact us, and it was the palpable interest. So.
Welcome back to another episode of MetaRick, where we talk about emerging technologies like the blockchain, artificial intelligence, and XR tech, things like the metaverse, VR, AR, and today a special new topic that we haven't had a chance to dive that deep into, which is these 3D monitors. Rather than diving deeper into the screen, how can we take that digital 3D asset out of the screen, have it pop out into our world? Today's guest, David Fattal, is the founder and CEO of Leia Inc. You might have heard of them from their product, the Lume2, which has been getting a lot of buzz at AWE and out in social media recently. Before that, he spent some time at Hewlett Packard. He got his PhD in physics at Stanford. So incredibly excited to learn about your backstory and how you kind of got into XR. Like maybe start from the beginning. Like what started off your career? What's your background in? And then how did that lead you into starting Leia?
Yeah, sure, and thanks for having me, Rick. I think it's always a pleasure to share, the backstory. So, yeah, personally, I'm a physicist. Okay, since I'm just very young, as a kid, I always had a passion for physics. I don't really know where it came from. I just remember for Christmas when I was a kid, I was asking for a physics book. So I was kind of the atypical kid, and I wanted to be a theoretical physicist. I did, I think, at the end of my kind of undergrad, did an internship at Stanford, and over there was something new. It was called quantum computing, and I was starting to kind of be experimentally sound, and people were getting a lot of nice experiments out there. So I joined the lab there, and just really enjoyed it. And from there, I started to learn more and more about the what we call the manipulation of light at the nanoscale, or how light behaves when it interacts with tiny structures. And it can do magical things. It can go through walls. It can do all kind of things that you don't really experience naturally in our everyday world. So this kind of passion for making magic with physics is always kind of what has been kind of driving me. A little bit later on, I joined HP to start actually a quantum computing lab, but over there expanded my horizon because there were so many projects, always playing with light. And in 2010, I remember distinctively hearing, it was a conference with a very famous MIT professor talking about holographic displays and how it was going to be very hard to achieve. I remember a statement saying we're 3 Nobel Prizes away from a viable holographic display. And it turns out that one of the problems, and without getting technical, one of the problems he was highlighting, it turned out that I thought we had solved in our lab at HP. So I was very intrigued, and HP was one of these companies that let you do a little bit of work, discretionary, as long as you do your everyday job. We had the kind of the 20%. And started to kind of look at that idea, and the funny part is we had about a month prototype that looked pretty convincing. Little hologram, I remember, was a letter X on top of a letter O. Okay, so nothing like super impressive back then, but then a lot of people at HP started to be really enthusiastic. So a lot of people were spending their 20% time, which soon turned into 110% time, on this project. In 2013, the tech made the cover of Nature, which is a very prominent scientific journal. So it turned into just a hobby, into something which we knew was going to be very promising. And a year after that, negotiated with HP essentially a spin-off, right? So we basically went on our own with the benediction from HP, and we started the company Leia in 2014.
Super interesting. I love that hearing, like, when people talk about technical founders, I think a lot of the time in SaaS, they immediately think software developer, like Mark Zuckerberg, and a pair of headphones that hack and code together, not as much of the physics lab. I think a lot of the times when physics, you think of academia and kind of these research labs, and you don't think as much about innovative, fast-paced startups. But the reality is that there's something really, really special there with the hardware that your team's put together. One question I want to ask is a little bit more on the business tactical side before getting into Leia. I've talked to a lot of folks that have gotten acquired and sold their companies to a big company, or sold their agency into a big consulting firm or something like that. But you did the other way. Rather than getting acquired, you spun off on your own. How did you approach that process? What does that look like? Obviously, some of it's confidential, but what does it look like to go from researching within a big company to venturing off on your own, and getting them on board with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because as you get from my background, I'm pretty much a pure scientist, and I had until that point no interest in entrepreneurship, even though I had lived in Silicon Valley for a while. So I was seeing a lot of my friends and people around me being very successful, but I was really into the science of it. It was more of a practical thing. I think the business we're in, it has a very large hardware component, and it's not the easy hardware. We're talking about manufacturing nanostructure, right? So nano manufacturing, and that field alone had just been invented. Actually, part of it at HP, 10 or 15 years before. So it's not like it was like a super mature thing. So there were only a handful of people in the world at that time who could have kind of taken on, this project. HP being a big company, they just move slower, right? And it's just just an observation. And I think when you have an idea and you're convinced that it's going to work, you can't wait, right? And in this case, it was not only me, but a lot of people inside and outside HP started to contact us, and it was the palpable interest. So it was almost like we were kind of forced to do it in order to launch the project, and we had to raise significant funds, because the first thing we did is we had to make one of these essentially nano manufacturing line, and this is not something that HP was willing to do right away. But so we had to kind of take the bet that was the right thing to do. So yeah, it was a big gambit, but ended up paying off with hindsight.
Totally, and with that, so that's a big transition, especially if there's other stakeholders on the team. Does HP maintain a bit of ownership in that? Is it just a buyout, or how do you manage the terms of kind of splitting off from an internal team? The reasoning makes sense to me, right? It's like you when you're that small and you're on the cutting edge of something so new, you've got to move faster. You can't have that big red tape of steering a massive tanker. But I wonder, from HP, was HP more just I don't think that we're going to be able to move fast enough to attack this. We got to let you do this, or what is the type of terms that they can make sure it's worthwhile for them?
Yeah, so I can't share all the details, but yeah, we had to make everybody, no, it's fine, just everybody happy. So for example, the Leia outright bought the kind of couple of patent applications that had been filed by HP back then. So I would say the IP licensing department was happy. Another thing we did is the tool or the tools that we ended up buying with the Series E money were part of them were actually installed on HP premises, and the HP researchers would benefit from it. So for a while we were doing some jobs for the HP research lab that actually HP research was not able to do at the time. So we got a little bit, and of course there's a little bit of some kind of corporate consideration. That's the part that we can really reveal. But yeah, at the end was a fair deal. Everybody was happy and comfortable, and everybody thought that was the best way to commercialize the technology and for everybody get the best out of it.
That's great. Yeah, it seems like being able to find amicable separations like that. There was always a good case scenario, like when you can maintain a bit of a partnership and like come out of it actually staying collaborative. That's really reassuring to hear. It's kind of like a breath of fresh air. And when we're watching shows like Succession, they're out here on TV these days. It's easy to focus on the drama and the cutthroatness of the corporate world rather than the reality that we're all human beings trying to innovate. When it comes to Leia, and once you break off on your own, you mentioned that you had to raise some significant capital. I imagine one of the hurdles building a hardware business versus a SaaS business is with SaaS, it's like move fast, break things, just innovate. With hardware, I imagine there's a different process for that. Like if you invest a whole bunch of money into a prototype and it's too far off, that's a much bigger mistake than if you break a piece of code and just recode it. So when you're going through that prototyping process, like what does that look like? Are you doing a lot of 3D rendering? Is it a lot of computer simulation? Or how do you kind of get from point A to point B?
Yeah. So it's the interesting part. So it's even worse than you think in a sense. Like if let's say today, if I want to prototype a VR headset, all the components are known, more or less. I can even hire a team to design the optics, or there's software for that, and then all the components are known. You can get a Qualcomm chipset and this and that. So I would say the risk is on the product side, but not really on the technical side, right? And certainly not on the manufacturing side. For us, for the little story, so we started the company in 2014. It took us 3 years to get some technology out of the manufacturing line. We're talking about displays, so you can't afford to have one little defect. Visible defect is wrong. And it's even worse than computer chips. Computer chips are built with some redundancy, meaning if you mess up in one of the tiny little wires on the chip is broken, electrons can take another path, right? It's called VLSI, so it's a redundant design. You're okay. On a display, if you have a little speck, you have to throw away the entire display. So the kind of the condition on the yield are very, very drastic. So it took us 3 years just to get something out, right, of the line. And then you're right. So it's new tech. So there's no standards. There's nothing. So it's kind of you have to keep prototyping until it looks right. And what we've been doing is of course we try to simulate as much as possible, so we don't have to do too much of the prototyping work in the lab. So over the years, we went from 100% having to prototype things physically to a place where maybe 95% is done now in simulation, and only the verification is done, on the hardware level. And so definitely that was necessary. Otherwise, the spend would have been too great. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you gain by experience, and that experience is what also constitute beside the patents, right? This know-how is what constitute the intellectual property portfolio, in the broader sense of the company. So now we have people and experience, in designing this type of immersive displays that would be very hard for anybody else to come and try to replicate. They'd have to go through the same pain as we did.
Yeah, the domain knowledge is underrated a lot of the time, because from a customer perspective, like all we really care about is like not how the sausage is made, but just that our sausage tastes good, right? Like you just want the end result. As long as the box works, amazing. But when it comes to building a business, like if you wanted to go out and build this product on your own, you have to go through those 3 years of learning and like all of the kind of hurdles that your team went through already. Someone's got to start that from square one. I want to zoom out a little bit, and I'm probably going to clip this and put it at the very beginning of the episode. I'm realizing I'm a total geek about Leia. I already know a lot about you guys. At AWE, I finally had the chance to try Lume2 in person, and I'm totally sold on it. I think for a mobile device that does what this device can do with 3D kind of holographic displays, is truly incredible. It's hard to advertise that in a video. You really gotta kind of hold one and see it to be fully sold on it, I think. But I'm realizing most of the listeners, a lot of folks may or may not be familiar with the Lume2 already and the other products that your team creates. So maybe if we zoom out a little bit and just talk about kind of the product line and like the end results of kind of what your products are being used for.
Yeah. So the core technology is what we call the 3D switchable displays. So we have to explain every term, right? So it means that we design and manufacture a piece of optics, call it kind of 3D optics, that we add to a standard display, and that makes the display essentially directional. I mean, every pixel can send a different amount of light or information in different direction of space. So we use that layer together with the known position of the user's face that we get through a camera to send a different picture, left picture or image for the left eye and right image for the right eye, essentially mimicking what happens in the real world. In the real world, your eyes get slightly different version of the scene in front of you, and that's why you see 3D. So that's great, and again, you're right. This is nothing that we can describe here is going to do it justice. So usually we don't even try. That's a bit the curse of our marketing team. But it really when you're in front of one of our display, it looks like the flatness, right? The kind of window disappears and a volume opens in front of you. Maybe that's the best way to describe it in simple words. Always joke, the hard part about our technology is what I call the switchable part. Okay, it's like when you are in 3D mode, by definition, at least minimum, at least the half the pixel have to be catered to the left eye and the other half to the right eye, which means that a given eye does not see all the pixels, which means that you're losing resolution. Okay. And in this day and age where people are used to retina quality and you have some incredible resolution on all of your everyday devices, from phones to tablets to laptops and so on, it's just unacceptable for most people to have content which is too low resolution. So in order to tackle that problem, we have a technology, and we have the only technology today that can turn off physically the 3D effect, and the screen can go back to what we call the 2D mode, where you don't lose any resolution or any let's say performance of the base display, so that you can keep reading your emails, the text, and browse the internet and so on, or if you want to watch your 4K Netflix stream and so on, then you can also do it. So at the product level, what that does is that we call this a no compromise technology. You don't have to compromise on what you already have, and then so if you want everything that you already had on a tablet, you have it, but then you have the option to turn on the 3D. And I think from that moment it becomes very interesting for the consumer, because they don't have to choose between I want an iPad or I want this. They say no, I can have both, right? So that's been from day one the premise. So I always joke that the hard part about the 3D display is the 2D part.
Well, and that is one of the things I thought was really interesting was, so there's some demos that are like product design, for example, like the idea you could have two product designers in different parts of the world without access to the product, be able to see the shoe or whatever the product is in 3D on this tablet. Very, very cool use case in more of like a business sense. But then I saw like Wonder Woman, I think was a movie that was playing at AWE, and you could go back and forth between it being three-dimensional or it being 2D, and it was kind of cool to just watch that happen in real time. For that, is that something where the streaming platform, like the application on the tablet, do they need to build that or create something on the software side, or do you have an automated way to just turn 2D video or 2D imagery into that 3D kind of look?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question, and actually it ties well into the history of the company, right? So once you have the hardware, what do people ask, right? So of course they ask for content. People don't buy technology, they buy experiences. So that's right. Yeah. So very early on, we're in the same. So and imagine us, we were a bunch of physicists and nanotechnologists, and one day it's like, okay, we have at the time was the red hydrogen was out. And we're like, okay, we need content now. And people look to us saying, it's your displays, how do we create content for it? We had to build an entire, I would say, software / content solutions team, inside the company, which is now, more than half of actually of our activity. And I would, it's very similar to what you'd find in a headset SDK, right? So we have an SDK program, a software development kit, which purpose is exactly that, is to make sure that third-party content is going to be compatible with our displays. At the end of the day, what you're producing for, before you send to displays, you want an image for the left eye, an image for the right eye. There's many different ways to obtain this, just similar to a headset, right? So the most obvious one, perhaps, if you come from the gaming industry, is whatever is generated with an environment like Unity or Unreal, right? So you have synthetic, I would say, 3D data, and the only thing you do is, instead of rendering your virtual environment from a single camera, in your game environment, you just have to put two cameras. It's the same as in VR, right? And the analogy actually continues. A lot of the content that you develop for VR is compatible with our platform, and vice versa, which is great. But there's other ways, right? You can take a Hollywood movie that was made for 3D, right? So you can get it in a side by side. They call it for a format. So you have an image for the left eye, an image for the right eye, and you can play it, natively on the platform. We have a special player that understands this format and then paints the proper pixels, left or right, depending on where your head position is located. Now, your question was interested is, what about all the rest of the content, right? All the 2D content out there. So we have also invested in the company in a great computer vision team whose main purpose is exactly that, to tackle that problem, is how can we convert 2D content to 3D in a way that is nice and pleasant to watch, because there's a lot of experiment that have been done in the past where it's 3D but it's disgusting. So we started really from the point of view of quality, and then over the years we ramped up the performance. So now what we can do is, very convincingly, we can, on a mobile device, on an Android tablet, we can actually in real time convert, you're right, 2D stream to 3D. And I don't know if you saw at AWE, we have an app that does this called Leia Inc. That allows you to take anything on YouTube, actually any streaming platform, works with CNN or whatever else is out there, and in real time is going to convert to 3D. So of course the result is not as good as what you'd have natively from a Wonder Woman that was shot in 3D, but it's very good. It's going to keep improving. And there are techniques that, if unless you've been sleeping under a rock, everybody's kind of aware of the new generative AI techniques that are also taking the world by storm. And this type of technologies, 2D to 3D conversion, are going to benefit tremendously, I think, from these advances. So it's conceivable that very soon, in the future, you'll get stereo, cinema quality in a real-time converted fashion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that are going to factor into that. To your point, one, like AI supporting the transition of 2D into 3D, I think is going to be a huge factor. But then the other one is just going to be the increase in production of 3D in the first place. Mm-hmm. Talking to brands over the last couple of years about these metaverse activations, and whether it's WebXR, VR, whatever it is, the general consensus that I'm hearing is that the 3D asset is going to be as important, if not more important, than the JPEG in just a couple of years, right?
Absolutely.
It's not going to be used for just one thing. It'll be product configurators for your sales teams to share with customers, for your marketing team to have live on your site. It'll be used for onboarding and training new hires. Like, you could have 3D renderings of a prototype product before it's even been manufactured. So for training and HR use cases, that's huge. Even for development and product teams, like we talked earlier about how 95% of your manufacturing is simulated now first before you get to the point where it's physical. All of that's possible because of these 3D simulations, right? Like that's what's allowing this to be the new direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been incredible, and it's a little known fact, but today I think the statistics, I think last year was 85% of the games are made in 3D, and of course they're not consumed in 3D, but they're made in 3D. If you think of every picture you take, with an iPhone or a modern phone today, when you take it in so-called portrait mode, you want to have the nice blur behind you. Unbeknownst to you, it saves the depth map, right? So it's actually a 3D picture that looks 3D on our displays, by the way. So 3D is actually all it's all around us. It just hasn't been expressed yet. So our mission is to express all of this content, that is latent, and that's just waiting to come out. So.
Well, and I'm even thinking of like the Vision Pro, kind of with one of their big focal points being this memory capture, 3D photo and video. The whole future of cinema is going to be this more three-dimensional. Even if you're consuming, not playing a game, like being able to feel like you're inside of the movie instead of watching it from an outside perspective.
Yeah.
I think that really is the future, but there's a blend there between having stuff pop out of the screen and you going into the screen. And all of the attention, I think, has been on WebXR and VR and this idea of going deeper into the screen. There's one exception to that, which I've been a big fan of, is these fake AR advertisements where it's really like a CGI ad, but then they have it posted all over TikTok and Instagram, so it feels like an AR filter. And that's like the closest I've seen to like how do we make it feel like it's coming out of the screen at me. These fake billboards and things like that. But your screens, and this is the next question I've got for you, is like at AWE, once I saw Lume, because I was at the Think Reality Lenovo booth, kind of posted up doing demos there, and you were right across from us. So it was like, this is amazing. It's a big booth. I've been seeing your ads everywhere. I finally get to hold one. This is awesome. And our whole team was just so stoked about it. But then after I played with it, I'm like, okay, I need to see any tech that's similar to this and to start comparing them. And I think I came across 4 other holographic displays. Most of them weren't comparable. I think the only one I really liked was the Sony. I forget what it's called, but the Sony one was very high quality. I think it was slightly higher resolution than the Lume, but it was also 4 times the cost and required a PC plug-in, and it wasn't a standalone mobile device. So when I give recommendations for holographic displays to people, it's always either the Sony or the Lume2, depending on your infrastructure and what you have available. One question I'd have for you is, obviously like a technologist that knows more about how it works, what makes it possible for the Lume2 to be able to be so mobile as like a tablet versus all of the other examples I'm seeing that have a separate PC kind of running off the back end for it?
Yeah. So I'm going to surprise you with the answer, but it has to do with that comment I made about the 2D switchability, right? It's not so much an ability. I think this you could put Sony's technology on a tablet and have it work more or less. But as I said, Leia and our technology is the only one that can truly switch the screen to 2D. And when you're on a tablet, again, you don't want to have to suffer that loss of resolution. Also because, of course, when you're on a big screen and driven from a PC and you're plugged in the power outlet, you can afford to have a 4K display and to burn 20 watts and so on. Of course, on the tablet you have power limitations. But I think the true answer is, it would be unacceptable to have a tablet that doesn't switch back to 2D, right? Because again, you want to read your emails, even the normal UI and so on. If all the letters seem like pixelated, it's just you're not gonna use it.
Yeah, so you can't read anything. That wouldn't work at all.
Yeah, so that's the answer. That's and then if you want to get on a phone, it's even more, people are even more picky, right? And on a laptop, it's going to be the same. So I would say the technologies are ultimately what you experience of it is very similar. It's just that there's only one that actually switches, and that's the secret. But that's the hard part, and that's why it's not a joke when I say the 2D part is the hard part. I mean it, right? It's really something that if it was easy, Sony would have done it, right? So.
Well, and that is a big differentiator, because like one of the biggest use cases where I went with my clients or the folks that I work with, when I recommend these holographic displays, it's like brick and mortar retail to me is this like untapped space that has a huge opportunity for innovation. Like Nike, Apple, Amazon, there's a handful of brands that are doing in-person brick and mortar really, really well. But for the most part, no one's really changed. Even post-COVID, where we thought we were going to have this revolution of new brick and mortar, it didn't happen. Everyone just closed down for a while. And people still shop in person. People still like to walk through a mall. I went to UTC in San Diego recently. It's like this big outdoor mall, and all of the brands are the D2C brands that we thought were going to kill brick and mortar. You've got Purple Mattress, you've got Peloton, you've got
Yep.
Allbirds, you've got Tesla, like all of these new modern brands that took off as e-commerce, direct-to-consumer products are now brick and mortar showrooms so they can engage with the market in person too. Because
Yep.
when you reach to a certain size, that's the only way you can keep growing in market share.
Yep.
But the thing is, in that use case, if you can't switch back and forth, it's really tough. I would picture you would want to be able to walk a customer through 3D kind of demos or a configuration of the products or interior design of a kitchen or whatever it is. But then you're going to want to swap over to like check out and buy something. You're going to want to like move over to a different kind of use case. So I wonder, like, that's the biggest use case I've seen personally. I could see a lot of consumer kind of entertainment use cases and gaming and other things. For you at Leia, is the focus more B2C, B2B? Like, kind of where do you put most of your attention?
Yeah, it's a question we often get. So we're trying to be Switzerland in that respect. We see our role as a technology enabler. So we enable hardware technology, and we're trying to make it available to all the OEMs. So OEMs are a manufacturer of devices, and of what we call personal devices. So personal devices are devices where you have a screen that you consume personally. So it's a one-to-one relation with the screen because we use head tracking. So it would be a phone, a tablet, a laptop, a monitor. We're also active in automotive, in-flight entertainment. So it's already like, it's everything but TVs essentially, right? And I think when you and also the other thing, of course, we provide is the software layer, right? So we have the hardware, we have the software, the SDK, and then if you want to use this for healthcare application, then we will help you. If you want to use it for retail, we will help you. If you want to make a consumer device out of it, we will help you. What we have done is, in addition to the pure SDK, we have developed a set of apps that cover pretty much anything you'd want to do, right? So we have, of course, a media player, model viewer. That's kind of the basic. But we have, for example, this year partnered with Zoom to allow 3D chat. So if you remember, the Lume2 has a pair of stereo camera in the back and in the front, but the one in the front allow you to do 3D communication. We have tons of, we have a movie streaming, right? We have a picture sharing. You were talking about a sharing moment, with Apple, and we've been talking about sharing moment in 3D since 2017. But of course, when Apple says it, then it becomes it becomes a thing. But since 2017, I've lived with a 3D phone and a 3D tablet, and exclusively, and I take all my pictures in 3D, and there's no way I'm going back. I have some young kids, and it's such a pleasure, right, to capture these moments in 3D. So I totally get it. So I think there's I always say there's three levels let's say of reason why people will want 3D, right? There's a utilitarian aspect, which is 3D, the real world is 3D, therefore you understand things better in 3D. So that's a little bit of the healthcare, the design, is the, I would say, not the boring, right, part of, but it's more the utilitarian, right? And then there's a more of an emotional layer, right? And perhaps because the digital content looks more like the real world, then it creates more emotion. So that's the retail use case. You're gonna be more likely to buy, if it's well done, if it's if it creates an emotion. But there, the depth of emotion created by 3D, pun intended, comes as much from the visual depth, but also from the perception of the lights and the textures, right? Because when you have the 3D feel, the lighting condition are also perceived correctly, whereas on the 2D screen things are flat because the pixel looks the same from every direction. So by definition, you cannot render a feeling of texture and so on. So there's that second layer is that emotion that you get. And because you have that emotion, the third layer of abstraction of why you'd want 3D is basically about connection, right? Is that if we could have this conversation in 3D in an immersive way, you'd perceive, all of the cues, the twinkle in my eye, when I make a joke or whatever it is, you feel more connected. And for all of this reason, I think that the 3D platform will take on. So I think, retail is, or healthcare or design is maybe the, what what people might think of today, also because traditionally the technology has added a cost to the device, but you'll be surprised to know, and next year we'll have next generation devices, you'll see that the cost will come down, and so we'll be able to go on absolutely every device with very little cost add-on, and at that point you'll want to do more things, right? And it's going to get into your everyday life, and it's going to enhance the emotion, the connection in your everyday life. So that's personally what motivates me, and I think I can speak for the team. Enhancing people's life is really at least the vision that we have for the 3D medium. Yeah.
I love the way that you break that down into those categories, because I think the utilitarian piece is like obvious, right? It's inherent. It's like the ability to appear like you can see something in 3D when it's not there. You save costs. You don't need the 3D thing to actually be there, but you have a more engaging moment where you can still get the benefit as if it was there.
Yeah.
The emotional thing, I think there's a statement on your website somewhere. It was like, don't see it, feel it.
That's right.
That really hit home for me, because I'm a big advocate that even in business, empathy is everything. People who make business decisions are still people who make business decisions. Like the way our brains work is that we're emotional first, logical second. That's just
absolutely.
At least in modern psychology so far today, that's where it's at and what we've proven, right? So when you can create that emotional spark, you've got a lot more influence over keeping someone engaged and interested in the content and finding it meaningful, right? The other thing I think about is, like, as you started talking about Zoom, I started thinking of like Google Starlink, which is like the extreme, right? Like if you had money, you could create this feeling of closeness and connectivity, which makes me think back to COVID. One of my best friends described this to me. He's like, the thing I miss most is platonic physical contact. Like, just like when you're having a conversation with your buddy, and like that subtle touch of the arm when a joke is made, or that fist bump as you're leaving. It's a small thing.
The small things.
When we hit a pandemic and a global lockdown and we didn't get to feel that anymore, it was obvious. Like that feeling of lack of connection was amplified by not having those little tiny things. And so just that 3D component, even on like a video call, if you can start to incorporate that more and more into those day-to-day virtual interactions, wow, like that just gets us closer and closer to a seamless integration of in-person versus not in-person. And that's tough. It's a really tough problem to be solving. The other question I have for you, this is kind of shifting gears out of Leia a little bit, but more just your thought as a leader in the space. Your hands are full and your capital's full, like you're busy solving one problem. But I'm sure you're aware and have noticed other problems that go on in this movement to a 3D internet. If you had the time and the capital to solve any other problem other than the one you're working on, what do you think is a problem that's not getting enough attention, or a startup that someone should be working on building?
I really like the concept of nerves. You probably heard, the neural radiance field, which maybe the best way to describe it is a way to condense or to compress, I think, a 3D scene to the essential. And you need artificial intelligence to somehow read it out, read out the compressed format and read it out into something that we understand as 3D. I think, given the progress of AI, I think it's going to be a format, maybe not exactly the nerf as we have them today, but the idea is saying that, this is going to be super easy to compress, an entire maybe CT worth of 3D. We talk about digital twin and so on to probably a few megabytes, and just have AI, reconstruct. And that's something that's fascinating to me. One of my favorite startup of the moment is Lume AI, right? So they, again, pretty impressive, folks. I think they're out from Apple, some of them. But you take a couple pictures and then you're getting, almost instantly these nerves, right? Which is like super impressive. We can take this type of data also and show them, I think, on our devices, and it looks stunning. So we can't do it in real time yet, but most likely my prediction is within 6 months to a year, given the rate of improvement of all these techs, we'll be able to do the same thing, take a couple pictures with the next generation LumePad or with your phone, and then create this kind of immersive interactive experiences. On the technology side, remember I have a background in quantum. I think, designing quantum chips for AI specifically, this is something that, if I had time, I would be looking into right now.
So, couple thoughts. Funny you brought up Luma because I like Luma. I've been following them, and I think nerfs are a big potential solution to one of the problems we talked about very early in the conversation, which is that conversion of 2D into 3D. How do we make something 3D as easy as possible? When I was working at Engage, we had an example from a company called River, great company, and it's kind of like an agency that works in the 3D space. But they would take a scan with drones of a city and be able to bring that into VR. I think we got a full 3D scan in less than 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't the most high fidelity in the world. Like if you really zoom in on it, then it's going to be a little
Mm-hmm.
pixelated and whatnot. But from a zoomed out perspective, incredible. Like it feels like you're standing in front of that city, and the fact that we could do that with a couple drones in 4 hours, it's crazy to me. But Luma, it's funny because it almost sounds like Leia. It seems like almost like a sister company to a certain.
If you read their vision and mission statement, it's almost the same thing. You know, it's the idea of democratizing 3D, or making 3D accessible for all. But they're doing it purely on the software side, and we're doing it on the hardware side. So yeah, it's very complementary.
Might be a merger in the future potentially. And I saw you guys just did an acquisition of another company recently, right?
Yeah. So when you made the comment about Sony being the only other technology that's worth looking, I was laughing because there's another company from the Netherlands called Dimenco that has incredible tech, very similar to ours. Just came from Philips research, and we came from HP. And yeah, we just acquired that company two weeks ago. So that was the I think that was the one that's probably should have been compared. But yeah, so our stomach is full right now for M&As. We all need to go back to work. It took a lot of time. So that's probably plate is full for now on that front. But yeah, they're definitely Luma, very sexy company. I think doing great things.
Was that your first acquisition for Leia?
Yes, yeah, it was the first, yeah.
Yeah, heck of an undertaking. It's it's just as hard as raising money, right? Like I imagine, like the due diligence and the back and forth it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, the idea is great. Even when you are completely aligned, at the founders, the management level, you high five, you're like, sure, it's great. And then the lawyers get in, and again, it's not that lawyers are bad. It's just that everybody needs to cover their rear, and it just ends up taking a lot more effort and time than you think. But it wasn't bad. I think what I can share is we had a target date for the M&A, and we kept to it within maybe 3 weeks, so it wasn't bad. Yeah.
That's pretty good. And obviously, I won't ask any of the nitty-gritty details of who got what and all that. But with the process for that, did you approach them? Did they come to you? Like, how did conversations kick off to get started?
Yeah, no, it was really on our side. So and the I can give you like the 2-minute gist of it. I claim that Leia has the only technology that switches from 2D to 3D, and that was true initially until maybe 2019-20, where this company Dimenco started to have also a similar type of ability to switch between 2D and 3D. And I think this technology that they're using was from Philips. The patent had been out there for a while, but just nobody really made it work, to the point where it was consumer ready. There's a lot of issues with selecting materials and maturity of optics and design and so on. But 2019 to 20, which was also the beginning of COVID, so that's when people stopped going to trade shows, and so it wasn't like super obvious, but started to see that it was getting kind of dangerous for us. So we approached them actually at CES last year. Just.
Oh no! So did you know they were going to be at the conference, and then tracked them down? Did they have a booth?
They had a private suite. Yeah, no, I mean we've been knowing each other at the management level for many years, so it was easy to get in touch. But yeah, no, definitely. The result is that now again we are truly truly the only company that can offer this 2D 3D switchable. The nice thing about the I would say the acquisition is we had been focusing at Leia on mobile device Android ecosystem, so phones and tablets. Dimenco had been focusing on laptop monitors, Windows. So also from the ecosystem point of view, I think this merger, guarantees that we can now cater 3D really, according to our mission statement, which is 3D anywhere, anyone, on any device. And truly is the case now. Anything between 6-inch and 32-inch, we can essentially enhance. So.
Very smart. Yeah, I think especially on the corporate kind of B2B use case, like that idea of it being a part of a workstation or like a
Yeah.
dedicated space, having access to those bigger screens is definitely a nice plus. This is also a good cultural sign. The fact that you've gone through like multiple of these like really big business merger, like exiting HP and then coming together and taking on this acquisition, like being able to handle those things amicably is such an important factor of growing your business to that next level, right?
Yeah.
The other, what was the other thing? I'm gonna have a total brain fart moment right now. Oh, the other thing I was going to ask you is out of the big companies, right? So we asked about startups that you would want to create or like a few of the startups that you admire that are out there. Out of the big brands that are playing with 3D, like whether that be 3D configurators for their products or big virtual marketing events, like any of these kind of gaming activations, like what are the big brands you think are getting it right that you see as like, all right, these guys actually get it. They're doing a good job of early adoption.
Yeah, I'm actually excited about the Apple Vision Pro. We know a lot of people criticize the price point, or there's a power unit that you need to attach and so on. But I think as usual, what Apple is doing is really trying to understand, if there's a market, and they're approaching it in a totally non-gimmicky way, right? It's almost like they're not coding it VR or anything. It's really going to be a replacement for your computer to start with, and then try to understand, if really that enhances what is supposed to enhance, the situational awareness, or the type of interaction, maybe the intuitive feel of how to interact with spatial computing components. So I'm very interested to see the result of the experiment. And I rejoice because, of course, when Apple does these things, then the industry pays attention, and a lot of 3D content is going to be created, again, whether it's movies or shows, and also user-generated content, which, again, I think we've been, from the beginning, was one of my theses, was that 3D will take on the day that anybody is a creator. Anybody can take pictures or videos, and this is, certainly you can do that with a LoomPad, but we're not going to have as many devices out as Apple. So you're going to have a lot of essentially 3D content creators, once you have this headset out. So I'm excited for that. But also I think the entire, we're all going to learn about new use cases. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
This is one of those things that, because I agree with you on the Apple Vision Pro. I know they've gotten some flack and there's some controversy over the price point. But I think the biggest thing Apple brings to the table is the ecosystem, not just of the product, but also like getting it in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
So they have these Apple stores. They've got thousands of stores around the world, where if you even just have one Vision Pro in each store, people
Mm-hmm.
might not buy them, but they'll try them. People will go in and schedule an appointment or do a quick demo.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of people, millions and millions of people that are going to now put on a headset and experience VR for the first time, that's a game changer. The second thing that they're going to do is they have Apple Pay. So you don't even need a deal with the telecom providers anymore to finance, like with smartphones. That was always the big deal, is like, which telecom company are you partnering with to finance your phone? Now Apple can just do it themselves with Apple Pay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big thing there. And I imagine we talked about this earlier for the Lume2. Part of the magic for me was finally getting to hold it in my hands. Like the videos were exciting and they get you interested in the idea. They sell you on the feeling and the vision. But until you hold it in your hand, it's really hard to drop that $1,000 to purchase a tablet. And props to you guys for keeping it under $1,000. That's the other thing I'm impressed with the product, is that it's much more affordable than the alternatives that I was seeing.
Yeah.
What's the process there? Is it partnerships to get it like in a Best Buy? Are you planning on opening your own showrooms like the other D2C brands we talked about? Or what's the vision to get it in more people's hands?
Yeah, I think what I said about our business model is we're really here to enable other OEMs. But in the beginning, you need to show. So think of the LoomPad, maybe as a reference design. It's a little bit more than a reference design, because obviously we took great care in it's a beautiful object. First of all, I think we have a designer on board that designed it. We did a fantastic job, I think. So more than a reference design, but still, I think the idea is that we just want to show what's possible, not necessarily go out and put all the marketing funds and efforts to push it everywhere. I think our primary customer is the OEM, and I think we win when the other OEMs pay attention and contact us because they want to replicate. And this is what happened with ZTE, right? I had a big Chinese OEM who were essentially in the beginning were manufacturing our device, but then fell in love with it and became a distributor, right? And of course, again, I can't talk about anything publicly, but the device was extremely well received. We won 7 Best in Show awards at Mobile World Congress, which was so very, very welcome by our partner ZTE, but also, of course, others are paying attention. So I think the goal was achieved. So again, I think we're sending it in at the B&H if you're in New York, right? So it's in the store, but I think otherwise we're just distributing online. I mean, it's available on Amazon, so it's not it's easy to find and so on. But we're not going to push it the same way that Apple pushes their devices, certainly, right? This being said, next year you will see the technology in many more devices and much more accessible, and also I insist at a much more affordable price point. So
that's really smart business. It's so much harder to build the next billion-dollar brand than it is to build great technology that supports a bunch of billion-dollar brands.
Right.
There's a lot of money to be made in having the best technology that you license out for other product lines and other companies. The one other thing that I'm curious about, and then we'll wrap this up pretty soon here because I know we're coming up to time. The one of the advantages to a tablet, to having the screen have this 3-dimensional component, is when you think of the Vision Pro or these mixed reality headsets, they're on your face, and like Apple's trying to solve that with the pass-through idea of like a recreation of your face, but it still looks a little goofy that you got this big ski goggles on your head. Versus with the tablet, like I can just have it out in the living room. With the Vision Pro, it's really hard to share with your friends. Like, let's say I can afford the expensive new Apple gadget, but maybe my buddies haven't bought it yet and I want to share it. Well, we've each got to take turns. Versus with a tablet, I can kind of pass it around. It's a little easier to share.
Yeah.
But there still is this limitation on like you're tracking the 2 eyeballs and showing the image. So I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but I was impressed that with 2 or 3 of us looking at a tablet, if you look from the right angle, you still can get a little of it. But do you have any plans or aspiration to solve for that multi-person kind of view, or is that pretty tough to accomplish?
Yeah, it's we came from, if you remember, the early and I don't know how long you've been following us, but a couple of years ago I think we were doing this type of passive non-tracked displays. The problem when you do that is that you need to cater for a certain number of users in front of the display. So instead of dividing your pixels in 2 groups, you need to now divide them in 8, 10, 16 groups, and the resolution drops. And what I said about users is they've been so spoiled by the technology today that if you have any type of significant drop in resolution, then people just don't like it. So this is something that and it's not only about the resolution. You also have when you track, you can continuously move the what we call the parallax, right? The look around effect. Effectively, you can have an infinite number of different viewpoints if you want to render. When you don't track, this number of viewpoints need to be finite. And what that does is that limits the amount of depth that you can provide, or you can create depth, but then you're going to have huge jumps, in the content as you move your head. So again, this is not something that you want. And we learned it the painful way, right? I think we learned it because we tried and we had a lot of feedback. So this is why, and in the kind of revised branding and messaging, and you heard me say it, that we cater to personal devices, when there's a one-to-one relationship, because we think that only then, with today's technology, you can provide the quality that the consumer would want. And yeah, I don't think ever, maybe other than putting implants directly in your eyes, you'll be able to have a tech that can convincingly work for multiple people, and meet the level of quality that you want. Because 2D displays are always improving, as well, right? So it's always, it's always a race, right? So, resolutions are improving. The expectation of consumer is always higher and higher. So, we need to be able to add that 3D feature, but also keep up with these trends, right? And yeah, you can only do that today if you know where the viewer is located. So.
Really, really great answer for that. I think the other thing I'm noticing is there's a trend where more and more of these screens are focusing on individual experience. So even with like I've got a PS5. Me and my roommate have been getting back into video games, and
Mm.
the big one we play is 2K. We play basketball to decompress after a long work day or
Mm.
whatever. But I started playing the new Call of Duty game, and we were gonna play together, and I'm like, oh, there's no split screen. Like they don't even have an option for split screen because so many people have these consoles now. They just assume you're gonna play online
Yeah,
on
that's
two
right.
different TVs from two
Exactly.
different places.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it kind of, as much as it's a technical limitation, it also seems like a cultural
Yeah.
alignment with the direction that you're moving
That's
into.
right. It's a little bit of a, consequences COVID as well. I think everybody now is used to kind of, their own, you're a little bit more, yeah, let's say isolated with your own terminal, right? And that's kind of the way that, so, whether you have it on your head or in front of you and so on, just having it in front of you and being able to tune in and out, as you said, is much more comfortable, right? So,
Yeah, and even if you're going to share something, for a lot of the use cases that you'd want it to be 3D, you can just share it. You don't need to be looking at it at the same time.
yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
a lot of the time it's like, oh no, check out this cool experience. Like you can
Yeah.
see it too.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll take
Yeah,
it.
it's all, I think what determines the multi-viewer or not is going to be the size, right? That's how we think about it. Anything up to a computer monitor is going to be a personal thing, when you start going into, 45, 60 inch and more, then that's a TV. And then the TV arguably is meant to be shared, right? At least by
Yeah.
family members. And that we're staying away from, yeah.
Well, the big one that's really tough is if we can make these fake AR billboards. Like if you could have a billboard on the corner that actually does that, that's pretty crazy. Right now, it's mostly fake AR campaigns, though.
It's just perspective. It works from one viewpoint. So, conveniently, everything you see on social media is taken from that magic viewpoint. So it looks great. But yeah, even in person, you'll see that something looks
We've
weird.
got to get a Leia advertisement on the big $2 million Vegas orb or two
That's
billion
right.
dollar Vegas orb.
That's right. That's right. Mm.
Yeah. Anyways, I know we're coming up to time. I want to be respectful of your schedule, running the company and everything. So David, if there's any place, anything you want to plug right now, anywhere people can find you, I always like to give you a chance to share that before we wrap up.
No, just, we have a website, leiainc.com. Leia is easy to remember from the obvious characters, in the in the Disney literature. And again, we just announced that acquisition of Dimenco, which is incredibly exciting. I think more for the industry. And if you're an OEM or a content provider and you're interested into these 3D displays, feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to work with you guys.
Perfect. Can personally vouch. I finally got to use one. I love it. It's amazing. Our whole team was super impressed. But when you have a chance to get your hands on one of these, definitely do it. And we'll put a link to everything David just said in the description, so it's easy to find. But other than that, that's the pod.